Welcome to the infamous edition of the Headstones and Microphones, where we use AI to step into the past through a researched first-person simulation done through creative storytelling of history's most infamous people. Now, let's meet our guest. Welcome to the podcast. Let's start at the absolute beginning, where the public narrative hasn't yet distorted who you were. When and where were you born, and what was your given name?
Hi, Calvin. Before the papers and the dime novels got a hold of me, I was just a boy named Robert Leroy Parker. I was born on April 13th, 1866, in the town of Beaver in the Utah Territory.
What was your hometown and home life like as a child?
My family moved to a homestead near Circleville, Utah when I was around 13. I was the eldest of 13 children, and my parents, Maximilian and Anne, were English Mormon pioneers who crossed the plains to settle out there. Money was always tight on our ranch, so I had to start working early as a teenager to help feed all those hungry mouths. Despite the hardships, we had a close-knit home life filled with music. I loved taking my younger siblings on pony rides, inventing games, and playing the harmonica while everyone sang along.
Was there a story behind your name or a nickname that stuck with you?
Around the house, my family just called me Roy or Bob, but when I left home, I worked for a time on a dairy ranch and met an older cowhand named Butch Cassidy. He was a small-time cattle rustler who took me under his wing, teaching me how to handle horses and shoot a gun. I respected him so much that when I started running from the law, I took his surname. A few years later, I had a brief stint apprenticing in a butcher shop up in Rock Springs, Wyoming. Folks started calling me Butcher Cassidy, and over time that just morphed into Butch. From then on, Robert Leroy Parker disappeared, and Butch Cassidy was born.
What were you like as a child, and how many years of schooling did you actually attend?
I was a hard-working kid, but I definitely had a mischievous streak. I attended school quite sporadically because ranch work took priority, and I occasionally got into trouble for fighting. At home, I loved reading adventure stories, but I also started finding excuses to skip out on church at an early age. I wasn't the type to sit still in a pew when the open frontier was calling.
Was there a decision that changed everything for you, but felt small at the time?
It was a tiny infraction that set the whole ball rolling. I was around 13 or 14, working at a nearby ranch, and I made a long ride into town to get some clothes. When I arrived, the local shop was locked up. Being impatient, I let myself into the clothes store, took a pair of overalls, and penned a note promising to return later with the payment. I didn't think I was stealing, but the store owner didn't care about my note and had me arrested anyway.
Let's talk about your early run-ins with the law. Before the world knew your name for your most infamous actions, what was your very first arrest or interaction with law enforcement, and what were the consequences?
That shop incident was my first real brush with the law. Even though the charges were eventually dropped and I was let off, the whole experience left me deeply resentful toward authorities in the legal system. It felt like the law was rigged against the little guy. A few years later, in 1884, my father lost his property in a bitter land dispute with a wealthy homesteader. Seeing my family get squeezed out by big cattle operations drove me over the edge. I decided the best way to hurt those wealthy outfits was through their pocketbooks. So I signed a false bill of sale for some stolen cattle and rode out of town right before the public found out.
At what moment did you realize your name would never be forgotten?
That realization hit after June 24th, 1889. I had fallen in with some outlaw companions and we pulled off our first major bank heist at the San Miguel Valley Bank in Telluride, Colorado. We walked away with over $20,000, which was an absolute fortune back then. When the news of that daring robbery broke nationally, and the law realized we had completely vanished into the rugged canyon hideouts of Robber's Roost and the Outlaw Trail, I knew I wasn't just a local rustler anymore. I was a wanted man on a grand scale.
Did fame make you more dangerous, or did it simply expose who you already were?
The fame didn't make me dangerous, because I never considered myself a bloodthirsty man. In fact, I made it a strict point to avoid excessive gun violence during our robberies. If we planned the jobs perfectly, did our reconnaissance, and stashed fresh horses along the getaway routes, we didn't need to shoot anyone. The notoriety just exposed the fact that I was good at outsmarting the authorities, which made the railroads and the banks put an even bigger price on my head.
Who do you believe betrayed you first? A person, society, or your own instincts?
Society and the big cattle barons betrayed the common folk first, which is what pushed me into this life. But if you mean a personal betrayal, I felt set up by the lawmen in Wyoming back in 1894. I was arrested and convicted for allegedly stealing a $5 horse. I was entirely convinced that the big cattlemen manufactured the whole thing just to get me out of the territory because I was helping the smaller ranchers.
What was your most unique habit or a random fact about you that would surprise people?
Most folks think an outlaw leader must be a brooding, terrifying character, but I was actually known for being incredibly friendly and well-liked. When I wasn't actively robbing a train or a bank, I would completely blend into local communities. I had a reputation for being helpful to my neighbors, helping out with chores, and sharing whatever money I had with folks who were struggling to get by.
What did the public never understand about the pressure you were under at the time?
The public read the exciting headlines and thought it was a grand adventure, but they didn't understand the sheer weight of the Pinkerton Detective Agency coming after us. The railroads hired the Pinkertons, and they were armed to the teeth, using every piece of modern technology to track our every move. You couldn't sleep soundly, you couldn't trust a stranger, and you knew that one wrong step meant a prison cell or a bullet.
Did you have any known rivalries that defined your career?
My main rivalry wasn't with a single lawman, but rather with the entire Pinkerton agency and the powerful monopolies they represented. They became absolutely relentless after we pulled off a string of highly successful train robberies with my gang, the Wild Bunch. It became a personal mission for them to dismantle us.
What personal battles were you fighting privately while the world was watching?
My biggest private battle was trying to figure out how to escape a life that I had outgrown. I tried to live a respectable life for a while, even using my robbery money to buy a ranch near DuBois, Wyoming. But ranching proved unprofitable, and the law wouldn't leave me alone anyway. I was constantly battling the reality that once the world labels you an outlaw, you can never truly go straight.
What was your darkest moment, and was there ever a time you wanted to walk away from it all?
My darkest time was being locked up in the Wyoming State Penitentiary in Laramie. I spent 18 months of a 2-year sentence behind bars in that gloomy place before I managed to get released early for good behavior. I actually had to promise the governor that I would leave Wyoming's ranchers alone just to get out. That prison stay made me realize I absolutely had to walk away from the American West if I wanted to survive. Sensing that our time was running out in the States, my partner, the Sundance Kid, and I decided to seek greener pastures and flee all the way to South America.
What truth was hardest to escape when you were alone at night?
The hardest truth to face was that the frontier I loved was dying. No matter how clever we were, the world was changing. Fences were going up, law enforcement was getting organized, and the freewheeling outlaw days were coming to an end. We were relics of a passing era.
When the law finally closed in, how exactly were you brought to justice? Walk me through the final arrest, the charges that ultimately stuck, and the legal outcome of your trials.
We never faced another traditional trial or a prison sentence after Wyoming. Our final reckoning came on November 7th, 1908, in the tiny mining village of San Vicente, Bolivia. We had just robbed a silver mine payroll, and a 3-man Bolivian army patrol tracked us down to a small house. A fierce shootout started, and we were completely surrounded by soldiers in the dead of night. There was a long, heavy silence after the gunfire, and rather than be captured and put in a foreign cage, 2 final gunshots broke the quiet inside our room.
What's the craziest rumor ever told about you, and what part of your story has been exaggerated the most?
The craziest rumor is that I actually survived that Bolivian shootout. Because our bodies were buried in unmarked graves, a lot of people back home, including members of my own family, claimed that Sundance and I survived, slipped back into the United States, and lived out our lives under aliases like William Phillips. People just didn't want to believe the Wild Bunch could be stopped.
What is the biggest misconception people have about your life?
People think I was a bloodthirsty criminal who enjoyed theft and violence. The truth is, I viewed myself as an outlaw cowboy fighting a defensive war against greedy corporations. I didn't rob regular folks. I targeted the institutions that were making life miserable for the average settler.
What would surprise people most about your ordinary human side?
Probably just how much I valued peace, camaraderie, and a good joke. I wasn't an angry man. I loved the simple things: good horses, loyal friends, a warm campfire, and a tune on the harmonica.
When, where, and how did you pass away?
According to the official history, I passed away on November 7th, 1908, in San Vicente, Bolivia, from gunshot wounds during that final standoff with the Bolivian military, at the age of 42.
Was your downfall caused more by your own flaws or by the world changing around you?
It was entirely because the world changed around me. The Wild West was tamed by civilization, communication, and big business. The wide open spaces where an outlaw could get lost simply ceased to exist, and we ran out of places to hide.
What scared you more? Getting caught, losing power, or being forgotten?
Getting caught and losing my freedom in a dark prison cell scared me a hell of a lot more than anything else. I never cared about power or fame, but the thought of being caged was unbearable. That's why I kept running, all the way to the end of the earth.
When you look back now, do you see yourself as the villain, the hero, or something in between?
I never saw myself as a villain, Calvin. I always thought of myself as an ordinary cowboy who took an extraordinary path to stand up against a system that wasn't fair. I suppose I'm just something in between, a man who lived by his own rules on a frontier that didn't have many.
Do you have any closing remarks about the interview or the stories you shared that you would like to share with the listeners before signing off?
Just that history is often written by the folks who own the banks and the railroads. When you think of Butch Cassidy, don't just think of a wanted poster. Think of a man who loved freedom and stood by his friends until the very last shot.
And that wraps up another conversation from Beyond the Grave. Thanks for joining us on the Headstones and Microphones podcast. Remember, do better with the life you have been given and choose to do good in this life. Please help spread the word by sharing and following the pod.